You're listening to the Mastermind Parenting Podcast with Randy Rubenstein, episode 30.
So the big question is this: how do parents like us know that we aren't messing up the biggest role of our lives, especially when we happen to have a strong-willed child that's constantly pushing our buttons? We've all heard that kids don't come with a manual. So how can we know for sure that we're saying the right things or that we're getting this parenting thing right? Well, on this podcast for parents of toddlers to teens, we'll be giving you real tools you can use right away so that your kids will feel like they can talk to you about absolutely anything and everything. My name's Randy Rubenstein, and welcome to the Mastermind Parenting Podcast, where we believe when your thoughts grow, the conversations in your home flow.
So in this episode, I think it's going to be a short episode. I want to speak about blame. Recently, I was actually sitting at dinner with my husband and his brother, and they were talking about somebody that they've known for a long time and they've known in business. And they were just talking about how he had had a lot of different business dealings, and for whatever reason, this one didn't work out and that one didn't work out. And they were just kind of laughing between themselves. They're like, oh, it was someone else's fault every time. It was this one's fault. It was that one's fault. And I just looked at him and I said, like, yep, a blamer. And so my brother-in-law said, why does somebody become a blamer? Where does that come from? And so it got me to thinking, and we kind of talked about it a little bit. And I said, I think when you grow up, when you're a blamer, and I think a lot of us get frustrated with our kids, especially our kids that live kind of in a state of defensiveness and they never want to own their behavior. Like you see them do something crappy and you're like, hello. And they're like, what? She was her fault. She did this. Or they get a bad grade on the test and it's the teacher's fault. There's just always blame going on. So we were talking about what are the roots of the blame? And I said, I think the roots of blame really come from a perfectionistic model a lot of times in the household. When kids don't feel like it's safe to make mistakes, and I think we pass blame down generations. I mean, I know it's been. I used to be a blamer for sure, and I know it's definitely a thing in our family, and so I think it gets passed down the generations where. And it comes from this place of it's not safe. It's not safe to be imperfect. It's not safe to make a mistake. It's not safe to be vulnerable. I could say that in my family lineage, when my dad was growing up, he had a very, very bad-tempered, angry, abusive mother. And she was a Holocaust survivor who was in Auschwitz and was in some really, really terrible situations. And we really, she never spoke of it. I think she just kind of lived her whole life with this unprocessed grief. But it came out in lots of rage with her 5 sons. And she just was a very angry woman. My dad even described her once to me as like a more angry mommy dearest for anybody that saw that movie growing up. And so I know that, when he was growing up, it for sure was a walking on eggshell situation, and you never knew what was going to set her off. I think that when kids grow up where there is a lot of yelling and tension and everyone's in survival mode, and that was the case for my grandmother. I mean, I think she never processed through this grief. So I think she basically lived in a state of survival mode. And so she was angry. There was a lot of anger. And I think that so many of us, we don't even realize it, but we live in this state of just constantly being on edge, and something's going to set us off, and our kids are fighting, and we got one of these strong-willed ones, and they're defensive, and a lot of times they're not that likable, and you have a lot of different situations going on where people are not their best selves, and you find yourself going down that rabbit hole of life's just not that fun. And so we're barking at each other. We're not having a great time. So somebody's always at fault. Everybody's just kind of living in this state of survival. And I think when kids grow up that way, it doesn't feel safe to be like, ooh, yeah, oops, made a mistake. Yeah, forgot to study for that test. Or, bad moment. It doesn't feel safe to do it. And I'll go back to one of my favorite things I've ever heard on an interview was when Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, said that somebody was asking her in an interview, how did you have, as a person who was selling fax machines door to door, how did you start a company? How did you have the courage to start a company? She had no experience whatsoever in retail. And she said, around my family dinner table, we had a nightly ritual where my dad would go around and say, what'd you fail at today? And if you weren't failing, you weren't trying. There really wasn't failure. It was you either accomplished something or you tried something and you, air quotes, failed, but you got out there and had the courage to try. It really was all about the effort and the willingness to try. And so she grew up with this ingrained in her brain that it really wasn't about the end result. It was about the journey. It was about the effort that you put in. And that simple nightly ritual around the dinner table, my husband recently, he was like, ooh, we should do that. And I'm like, I know, our kids, it's kind of too late. But for everybody who has younger kids, I think that is such a beautiful nightly ritual. And I think that when you start talking about the mistakes that you made in your day, the things you forgot, the areas where you're imperfect, the places that you don't have all the answers, when your kid messes up or screws up and you find it and you're like, you know what? I get it. I've done that too. I totally get it. And you do that active listening piece and that empathy piece. You send them the message that they don't have to try and strive for perfection. That's not what's going to keep them safe in this world. It's totally safe to be imperfect and to make mistakes and to have bad moments and to have bad days. And we get it. We're all a team here. And we have good days, we have bad days, but we always have each other's back. So I think that's how we raise our kids, not to grow up to be blamers, and also to have the courage and the willingness to try and try and try again. And when things don't go your way, to also take ownership and to say sometimes, like, you know what, I gave it my all. It didn't work out for me. And it was super disappointing. I was upset. Owning your feelings, being willing to lean into, as I say, being willing to lean into the suckage. It takes practice to be able to do this. And I think what you guys are going to find is the more you do it, the more it will come naturally. And it feels literally like freedom. So that's what I got for you today. And I will talk to you guys next week. Have a great week.
Hey, did you enjoy this episode? If so, then please take 2 minutes to just leave us a review. I love creating this show, and I do it to help as many families as possible. So leaving a review may seem like kind of a pointless exercise, but it actually helps us reach more moms who might really need to hear these episodes. It would mean the world to me, and plus, it's just plain good karma. Thanks. Hey, you guys, thanks so much for listening. Mastermind Parenting Podcast is supported by my best-selling book, The Parent Gap. Usually getting a copy of the book and the audio version for you to listen to on the go would set you back around $20. But you can get both a digital copy and the audiobook for just $5.60. It's my gift to you for being one of my podcast listeners. So head over to mastermindparenting.com/book to grab your copy now.